Hey, everybody, it's Karen Anderson here with Aortic Hope for another live event, which is why I got to tell you before we get started, you've got to click the like button and you got to click that subscribe button because if you don't, you're going to miss things that happen like this. You know, we go live every week for our weekend review on Mondays. We love going live when we have our survivors that are bold enough to tell their story in real time to you and take your questions. And we go live when we have special guests like the one we have today. With us is Kim McNicholas, and I'm not going to say a word past that because I want her to tell you all this information about herself that we discussed the other day. And quite frankly, you're looking beautiful in red there, Kim.
Thank you. This is my mom's favorite color. And I'm so
Wonderful.
thankful to be able to be here today with you and to have been able to rendezvous with you and your
Yeah.
organization because it's been a 2-year search for hope after
Well,
I lost my mom.
you found it here. And that's what I want to talk about, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of accolades and things about you that maybe people may or may not be familiar with beyond the description that I put up. But today is a really, it's an important day. It's an important day for you. It's ends up being an important day for a lot of people within this organization and in the community. And today has been 2 years since your mom transitioned from a misdiagnosed aortic dissection, which is literally the words that we all hate to hear. It's some of the things, I hate very little, but I hate when episodes like this happen. And, it does tend to happen that people are dismissed because of age, because of gender, because of race, and it's so annoying. So I'm going to deep breathe and I want you to tell everybody exactly what happened and what your connection to this community is. That's going to be our part 1, and then I'm going to transition into the super excited to talk about part 2. But this is really important. There's always lessons to learn, stories that we can have really that cause validation for our own experiences. And so I really want to just zip it and allow you that opportunity to share what has gone down in your own family.
At 8:03 a.m. this morning, 2 years ago, Pacific time, we were in South Lake Tahoe and I had to allow them to pronounce my mom dead. And it was a very surreal, little bit more than an hour. It started at 6:45 in the morning. My dad, my mom, and myself were up in South Lake Tahoe with our 3 dogs on vacation. We were celebrating a friend's birthday as well as Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day was our last dinner with my mom. And the next morning, 8:03 a.m., I knew how much my or 6:45 a.m., I knew how much my mom wanted to see the snow, but it's still not like me to want to get up at 6:45 in the morning, an early morning, last day of vacation, and run downstairs and go outside. And especially since my mom and dad were sleeping, I didn't want to wake them up, but I did really want to catch the snow because I was afraid that it was going to go away before my parents got up. I run downstairs, try to be as quiet as I could, but my parents woke up and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, it's snowing outside. I want to get some video. I was going to take the dogs out, let them play in the snow, get some great video footage for you of especially her dog Chardonnay playing and licking the snowflakes and such." And my dad said, "Well, here, I'll go with you." And my mom in that moment sat up in bed and I remember just looking at her and seeing this angel. I felt like she glowed. And I remember thinking, wow, she looks like an angel. She looks beautiful. It was almost like her face was all made up. I don't know if it was this aura I could see. I have no idea, but I just remember thinking that. And I said, "Morning, mom. I love you. I'm going to go get you video." And she said, "Okay." My dad and I start to walk outside. We hear her announce, "Well, I'm going to go use the restroom," which I thought was very weird. And
Hmm.
I think later that, am I supposed to go back and check on her? Or should I have gone back and check on her? Was that a sign? But
Hmm.
my dad and I weren't out more than 15 minutes and we came back and she was on her knees on the floor and she just was shaking her head and she grabs my hands and I said, "Mom, what's going on? What's going on?" She says, "Kimmy, I don't know what happened." And I said, "Dad, call 911." And all she would do, she would just shook her head. And she just whispered no. And I said, "Okay, Dad, get her the oxygen, get her the oxygen." So we got these cans of oxygen and it wasn't working. And I just felt like she went limp. And although we did call the ambulance came. It was horrific. I don't know if you've ever seen manual CPR performed where they have to tear off the clothes and you hear the crack of the chest, and that was my mom.
Yeah. It's
And
horrible.
it was weird because in that moment, it's like
Hmm.
I knew she was gone, but I didn't know why. And I ended up I called my brothers, and as they're performing CPR, it was just like, what's going on? Is this
Right.
really happening? Am
Yeah.
I standing outside? I felt like I was standing outside myself, just watching a nightmare occur. And
Yeah.
I kept snapping my fingers, going, am I going to wake up? Needless to say, they transfer her to the hospital, and CHP man was so nice to drive me to the hospital because it was snowing and I couldn't drive in the ice. And I said, they took her to the hospital out of respect for us, didn't they? And he said, hey, you know what? You got to have hope.
Hmm.
And I knew the moment I walked into that hospital and I didn't hear anything, I didn't see any hustle and bustle, I knew. And the doctor came out and got me and walked me in, and you could see those big pumps going up and down and up and down. And she said, I think it's time. And I said, not yet. And I called my brother, I let him pray over her. And he said, Kim, God just told me that she's in Jesus' arms. And I just burst into my tears, and I said, yeah, it's time. And so she called it at 8:03 a.m. And we ended up going out to the car, and I grabbed my mom's dog. And this is just an important part for me, so I hope you don't mind me sharing,
No,
because
please.
she had a service dog for her Crohn's disease, and the Crohn's that she had, which is that, issue with inflammation in especially the upper intestines. And so her dog could sense when she was going to have an attack before she would
Hmm.
have it. And she'd been a service dog for a couple of years for her. And I said to the doctor, I need to bring her in. She needs to know. And I brought her in, put her on her stomach. She walked up her stomach to her mouth, sniffed around, turned around, walked right back down her chest, off to the side on her arm, and just laid down and put her head down. She knew in that moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was very powerful. And my dad and I leaving there from 6:45 to 8:03, how quick of a turnaround is that? My whole
Right.
life flashed before my
Completely
eyes.
changed in that minute, in that
And we
hour,
had to
hour and a half.
leave there not knowing, knew and
Yeah.
knew.
Right.
No one knew what had happened. She had been to 2 orthopedic surgeons. She had been to a physical therapist. She had been to 2 or 3 cardiologists, a vascular surgeon, and an ER doctor, all in a matter of 2 months prior to.
So back up, because the part I think it's important, two things that are important is how old was your mother?
She's 83.
She knew she had a thoracic aortic aneurysm. I think I remember you telling me this. So at some point prior, she was diagnosed with that and was being monitored and followed for that?
No.
Okay.
So the year before, after, she started having shortness of breath, and they couldn't figure out why.
Mhm.
And she had a pulmonary embolism back in 2012 due to some estrogen cream that
Mhm.
had high risk for blood clots.
Yeah.
And was never really monitored after that, was on Coumadin for 6 months, and then said she was fine. She did have thick blood. Her ferritin levels were high. And so
Mhm.
I was wondering about this thick blood, but no one could answer it, said she's fine. She has had high blood pressure for a long time. They blame that on white coat syndrome, and she was on lisinopril or something.
Okay.
I was able to get her primary care physician to order an ECG. There was some sort of abnormality, enough for her the year before to go to the cardiologist. Got her to the
Mhm.
cardiologist, got her in, of course, with delays that summer. And I convinced him to get a 256 slice CT scan, because at 83 years old, you think, well, possibly some plaque in her arteries, maybe
Mhm.
the right coronary. A lot of the breathing gets brushed off as asthma or lung issues or some, and you go
Yeah.
to a pulmonologist when it could just be your right coronary and there might be a narrowing in there. So I
Sure.
said, get a 256 slice CT scan and let's take a look. And that's where they found a little bit of a dilation in her thoracic
Okay.
aorta. I didn't know at that time, and you would think with what I now do for a living, saving life and limb for people with poor circulation in their legs, known
Mhm.
as peripheral artery disease, and having a lot of experience with the heart along my journey and being able to save my own dad's life
Mhm.
through my knowledge, that I wouldn't have taken that time to go look up the aneurysm and find out that if you have a thoracic aneurysm, it is standard protocol, my understanding, that the doctor should order an abdominal scan to check and see if it
Yeah.
extends any further down.
Right, right.
And they did not do that.
Hmm.
So a few months later, she had the third COVID, the booster,
Mhm.
and within 2 weeks of that, her blood pressure became erratic. Her heart rate skyrocketed for seemingly no reason at all. And she ended up with, we went on a trip down to San Diego. We live in San Francisco. So we went on this road trip down to San Diego to visit my brother. And on the way, we stopped and, got a little bit of, the food was greasier than we normally eat. We usually eat pretty
Mhm.
healthy. So when we got down to San Diego and she started having gut issues, we were thinking, oh, possibly her Crohn's, that grease triggered it.
Right.
And even though it had been in remission for years, we
Mhm.
thought, oh no, that might have triggered it. So she was literally vomiting and having, other gut issues. But then she kind of snapped out of it after a couple days, but she never really started eating the same.
Hmm.
She usually would eat 4 chicken wings with her dinner and a full artichoke, and she was down to 1 chicken wing, maybe 2, not finishing
Mhm.
her artichoke, and I couldn't figure it out. By Christmas, this was over November, by Christmas, she comes in and she says, "Kimmy, I don't understand. I feel like my heart is racing."
Hmm.
And I looked, it was at 119. I
Okay.
said,
Yeah.
we need to get you in to see your cardiologist again." Got her in to see the cardiologist. Her normal one wasn't available. They put her on yet another blood pressure drug, thinking
Mhm.
that, but no exploration as to why this is happening.
Right.
Why is her blood pressure suddenly becoming erratic? Why is her
Yeah.
heart rate high? No, let's just give her another pill and send her on her way.
Mhm.
The next thing we know, she starts feeling some pain in her back, and she has degenerative disc disease. She had fallen earlier that year, broken her tailbone, and a lot of times it's always one thing after another, and the problem becomes when those overshadow something else, that could be mimicking the same symptoms, right?
Exactly.
And doctors just brush it off. So they were
Right.
saying, we went to the orthopedic surgeon. The orthopedic surgeon said, "What do you want me to do?" Didn't bother touching the patient. Said that, you've been here a million times. I can give you a shot. That's all I can do.
Mhm.
And I said, "Mom, what do you want him to do?" I mean, he can't do anything. And I felt terrible
Yeah.
because what was I going to do advocating for her with an orthopedic surgeon that was just a jerk?
Right.
So we sent her to another orthopedic surgeon who said, "Yeah, looking at your things, this could be, still your back after that fall earlier this year. I'm going to send you for traction and for
Mhm.
physical therapy." And my dad was working with her every day on physical therapy. And my poor mom, I can only imagine now, was suffering immensely
Yeah.
from imagine traction with having a dissection
Right.
starting. I mean, are
Yeah.
you kidding? And being forced to walk, being forced to do these exercises. And she was doing this to please us
Mhm.
and to show that she was trying. But then one day, she went into the hot tub, got out of the hot tub, went into the shower, came out, and I was sitting there and she says, "Kimmy, ow." And I said, "What's going on?" She's holding underneath her rib cage, it seemed, which
Mhm.
seems odd because you would think it'd be lower. But my understanding is that there's weird radiating pain back
Nerves.
to
Yes.
front.
Right.
And so for her, she wasn't clear on exactly where it was coming from, but all she could, was like, "Oh, my boob hurts," or "Wait, I'm not sure. Maybe it's my back," or
Yeah.
something. She wasn't sure.
Right.
So I'm thinking it's a pulled muscle. She's thinking it's a pulled muscle. Although,
Mhm.
what, how did she pull her muscle? Maybe she didn't realize it when she was getting out of the hot tub and it just
Sure.
suddenly twinged. You never know when you're 83 years old. Goes
Right.
to the ER. The doctor just does an x-ray, never comes back into the room, sends a nurse in, says the x-ray's fine, and to give her a high dosage of muscle relaxers, which even the pharmacist said was higher than even someone who was, 6 foot tall, and my mom was
Yeah.
4'11". So she just was completely out of it by the time she got home. The next week, we went back to her regular cardiologist. regular cardiologist, never touched the patient, sat there with his notes, kind of depended on me, which
Mhm.
is why I kind of feel a little bit to blame here that I said to him, with this erratic blood pressure, with this tachycardia, do you think, and it's the phrasing of my question I kick myself for, I said, with those, do you think that they're possibly exacerbating or have the potential to exacerbate her thoracic aneurysm?
Mhm.
And he looks at me and he says, "Oh, actually, yes, Marilyn," to my mom, You really need, we need to get this in order. We need to get this calmed down." Still, no exploration why.
Right.
Doesn't bother to go over and touch the patient.
I'm still stunned that
I'm
we're still at a place where
curious.
no CT of the abdominal area has been ordered for any of this pain, considering the Crohn's. They're not even looking at what they already know is in her background and making a recommendation based on what they know, which would have been wrong, but they would have found something.
And
Gosh, it's so
going to the
frustrating.
ER
Yeah.
and the doctor having her previous CT
Right.
scan, but thinking that that was cardiovascular, doesn't put two and two together. And I think that that happens a lot when it comes to cardiovascular and vascular issues,
Yeah.
that they're immediately sent to a structural doctor,
Mhm.
right? And the structural doctor, that's what they look at first. Is it a pulled muscle? Is there a broken bone? Is there a torn ligament? Something of that sort. Is there just a general neuropathy issue? But they
Right.
don't bother to look at why.
Mhm.
Why is this happening? Are these acute symptoms happening? And I think that the patient does play a role as well, in a sense that I know when I've gone into the doctor, or my dad's gone into the doctor, or my mom goes in, you almost, I consider, lead the witness, right? You go in there, and I'm sure my mom said, "Well, I think I might have pulled a muscle."
That's it. That's all you need to say. And
So
they're following your lead. You're exactly right.
that's
You're
it.
leading the witness. Yeah.
My dad walks into his primary care physician and says, "I think I have indigestion."
Mhm.
She couldn't get past that until I said, "Actually, I think that he has a history of heart disease, and that should be checked, and that could be mimicking or
Sure.
exacerbating the problem." Sure
Right.
enough, I was right. But
Yeah.
the doctor was not about to explore any further than give him some Prilosec.
Mhm.
And that's with my mom. They gave her the muscle relaxer. But here's the kicker for me is I'm really big into the legs. I'm big into chronic venous insufficiency and peripheral artery disease, mainly issues in the legs. And so I'm thinking, with my dad at the time at 79 years old, my mom at 83, that my mom is having some trouble walking. Maybe there's something going on with her, some peripheral artery disease. Maybe she has plaque in there. Maybe she has some chronic venous insufficiency
Mhm.
that's playing into some of these, at least, leg issues that she was
Mhm.
experiencing. So I sent her to a vascular surgeon. We went in, even though she's like leaning over by that point. I kept saying, "Mom, like a marionette, like a little puppeteer, like
Right.
pull yourself up. You need to focus on that." She kept leaning over and
Mhm.
walking over with a lean. And she couldn't really stand up straight, and she was kind of limping. And that wasn't a sign for the vascular surgeon who specializes in aortic aneurysms. I actually
Right.
said to the doctor during the consult following the venous exams, they said, "Oh, the veins are fine, the arteries are fine." And I said, "Well, she did have a thoracic aneurysm that was detected. Would you mind checking for a bruit?" I was so proud of myself that I was like, I learned the word bruit, that
Mhm.
turbulent flow, spelled brute. And I wanted him to check. I wanted him to chat with him, check the carotids, check the heart, check the abdomen for aneurysm, check
Yeah.
the toes, feel those pulses, touch the
Mhm.
patient.
Right.
So my mom starts to lean back, and she's like, "Ow, ow, 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 ow." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, Marilyn, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And she says, "Well, I was just in the ER last week. They said I pulled a muscle, blah, blah, blah." He's like, "Oh, okay. Let's check things at another time. We won't worry about it." Nothing.
Mm.
Even though I said the word aneurysm, he
Mhm.
never wrote it down in his notes.
Yeah.
And it never clicked for him
Mhm.
that maybe another doctor might be wrong.
Right. So frustrating. So frustrating.
So that
Yeah.
it's still, I kick myself to this day because I spend my life saving life and limb. And my mom said to me that day, "How is it that you can save everybody else, but you can't save me?" And I said, "Mom,
Ugh,
you're not
yeah.
dying."
Right.
She had that impending sense of
Yes.
doom,
Yes.
which I hear is
It's very common.
frequent.
Yep, it is. You made a really good point, and as I share with you, my father died suddenly, but leading up to his death, he had a personality change that had happened. He was on Eliquis. He was having a lot of nosebleeds, being on that because of AFib. And they would just say, well, it's because of being on Eliquis. Let's pack your nose. And then the next time when he was bleeding out of his eyes, it was, well, let's do a surgery on your nose. And then the next time it was, well, we're going to have to do another procedure, and we can give you a procedure that would allow you to come off of the Eliquis. You'll still have AFib, but you won't be at risk for a stroke, and that's called a Watchman procedure. This whole time I have had conversations, and we're not that far off in age, but to sit down with one of my parents and have to express concern or disappointment, oh my gosh, it's like I want to say it and then I want to run away because I'm sure I'll be punished because I spoke my mind. And you have to be careful not to say it in a way that comes across as stern. And my father was only like 76 or 77, I can't think right now. And he was about 77. And I told him, I said, this personality change, you're like kind of gray, and this just doesn't seem normal. I said, it's too easy to chalk this up on a medication. That makes
Right.
sense that you would be having these nosebleeds. Like, it would make sense that some of your mother's abdominal discomfort could be due to Crohn's, even though it was in remission. It can pop up out of nowhere. It makes sense. She got out of the hot tub weird. She could have, I know I get out of bed and I put my feet down and I think, how did I break everything in my body while laying in bed? So at 83 or 82, I can only imagine you just twist and you could really hurt something. I said to my dad, 1 plus 1 equals 2, unless there's a one hiding behind one of the ones, and then it could
Right.
equal 3. And I said, I think you really need to have a CT of your brain or an MRI of your brain. I'm concerned that there's something in there pushing on an area that's changing the personality. But he would say, oh, it's just because you're really sensitive from the work that you do. I'm like, no, because I know it's not your abdominal aneurysm, because I know you literally just had it checked. It hasn't grown in like a decade. You, no pain, no anything, but he didn't get it checked. So when he passed in a parking lot, and I wasn't there, all I wanted to know is, did he grab his chest? No. Okay, well, I'm pretty certain it wasn't an instant heart attack, like some type of cardiomyopathy. It was something else. He went to reach up. And how you just know, I
Yep.
feel like I just know it was something. There had to be some type of something in his head that was contributing to the nosebleeds. And I want to kick myself that I didn't insist, just put my childhood, get my big girl pants on, right? Not live like I was a child and just say, you are going to go have an MRI. At least rule out the possibility of the most utmost worst case scenario. What's it going to do? Come back and say there's nothing there? I would feel like, okay, at least we don't have to worry about that. And we would figure something out. And I do think it is, I mean, that's why I wanted you to say your mother's age, because I think even with younger people, we have people that are in their 20s. It goes even younger than that. Unfortunately, obviously, if they have Marfan or another type of syndrome, they're just completely discriminated against. They are
Hmm.
brushed off to the easiest solution. Let's move it on and get the next Medicare patient in, or the next, private insurance patient care in. And, you got your 12-minute time so I can give my notes and let's move them in and out. And
Right.
it's hard because at a certain age, they're not, if they wanted to advocate for themselves, they're not sure. And they do lead the witness, but not intentionally. Um, gosh, you're making me think that I think my mom sometimes does that too. I think we
Yep.
all could do that, but I think that that is a lesson that you don't lead. You don't show all your cards. You keep it to yourself, because if what they're saying literally makes no sense, and it's open for discussion, but I just think it's so tragic what happened, because it didn't need to happen.
Nope. Mm.
But I think the second most frustrating part of what you and I discussed was what you and your brother then did after all this happened, and how nobody wanted to really help you, which is amazing.
Right. So my younger brother went to his doctor and said, "Hey, one, my dad has heart disease. My mom had this aneurysm. I need to be checked. I want to find out what's going on and if I can do something sooner rather than later. If there are
Yeah.
any indications now, let's get things moving. Let's get me on treatments. Let's get me on any meds. Let's get me on some sort of cardio program, something to make sure that I this isn't missed down the road."
Mhm.
They refused. Same thing happened to me to the extent I was in a California HMO and I went to my primary care doctor and she actually put in my chart that I was a hypochondriac because I was requesting
Unbelievable.
based on my parents that this is that this was happening. So I just left it alone. But then when my younger brother went on his own and got his own CT calcium score and he got an
Mhm.
echo and he paid for his own advanced testing, he found out that he had a bicuspid valve defect and
Mhm.
two aneurysms.
Isn't that
And now
amazing?
he's on a 3-month watch. Every
Yeah.
3 months, he has to be watched. And he is going to end up with a big open procedure.
Right.
He'll be joining the
Right.
zipper club with that, but they're keeping close watch. They don't want to do that too soon or too late.
Mhm.
I bring this back to my primary care. My primary care says, no, I still don't think so. You're fine. You're healthy. I'm looking at your blood work. Biggest misconception is all of these doctors look at a basic lipid panel and they say your
Mhm.
cholesterol is fine, your HDLs are
Right.
fine, your triglycerides are fine, your LDLs. But what they don't look at is the advanced lipid panel.
Mhm.
You
Correct.
really need to understand not just the quantity, but the quality
Mhm.
of your blood. Need to find out you could have a whole bunch of large, fluffy LDL particles, the so-called bad cholesterol, and you're not at risk for heart disease or any problems. You may not, you may, but you may not. It's
Mhm.
those small, dense LDL particles that when they become oxidized by trans fats or free radicals, that they can eke into damaged areas of your arteries and push that wall out.
Mhm.
So, because my cholesterol was normal, no, there's no way you have anything vascular going on. And so I fired that PCP. I went ahead and
Good.
made an appointment with another.
Mhm.
And that's where I actually found out that she had put in my chart that I was a hypochondriac and that he had just passed her in the hall and she said, good luck. And I looked at him and I said, honestly, I said, that to me seems like a violation of HIPAA, that you should never have had that conversation in the
Mhm.
hallway without my consent. You might be in the
True.
same healthcare system, but I did not give you consent to talk to the other doctor at this point.
Right.
If you
Right.
checked out my charts, that's fine. But I didn't give you a permission to have a conversation with them. So I said, I highly suggest that you get me that testing. And he did. And I ended up, it was a mess. They don't do advanced blood work, nothing else. So I quit. I fired that entire HMO, went back actually to my mom's doctor. And I said, "So you failed my mom.
Mhm.
You're not going to fail me. I want all of these tests ordered."
Mhm.
So, I got the advanced blood work. Turns out I had a high level of these small, dense LDL particles. Number one. Number two, I ended up with an echo. They found out that I did have um, a, my aortic root was slightly dilated at 3.7. But I don't know if you're aware, but there's a Dr. Craig Walker, who's an interventional cardiologist who runs a very famous conference called NCVH, New Cardiovascular Horizons. And when I was at his conference a couple of years ago after my mom had, or it was right after my mom had passed, it turns out that they're finding more and more small women are having ruptures and dissections sooner, and
Hmm.
that they really need to take into consideration the size and weight of
True. True.
women who have aneurysms. And so while my mom's was about a 4, that's about the point. He said that you should strongly keep an eye on it every few
Mhm.
months. For me, mine's at 3.7. And they said if it moves to 4 now, they will keep a much closer watch. But right now, I'm just
Right.
on once a year to go get checked at this point. But now, after going to this doctor, my brother having it, me having it, my mom having it, now they're suddenly interested.
Mhm.
So the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF, is very interested in aortic issues, and their research department reached out to me and they want to do some genetic testing
Hmm.
now to find out if some sort of tissue disorder, there's some sort of genetic tissue disorder that is
Right.
causing weakness in our vessels and leading to early onset of aneurysms.
And just know that if it comes back with a variant of unknown significance or saying there's nothing now, go back in 5 or 6 years because there'll be more genes. When I went the first time, I
100%.
think there was 30, maybe four. And then I went back 6 years later, there was like between 38 and 42. There was additional
Oh,
panels that
wow.
get added. So you do want to keep going back. It's not like with a research program where there's a chance that they'll rerun your blood each time they discover new. It's really, and that's a chance. When it's done clinical, you really have to go back and they just rerun the whole entire panel. And you can also be checked for any genes that might cause Crohn's
Hmm.
and know right now, are you at risk for anything? And, is there anything you can do, which would be maybe keeping tabs on your inflammation markers, your CRPs, or, you don't need to have a colonoscopy like twice a year or anything like that. But just keeping, you would know now that when you feel something, you get to judge it differently. And so does your GI doctor. Things get, when they know you have something, you're looked at differently, you're followed differently, which is why I do like knowing information. Some people don't want to know, but I'm in the camp of wanting to know. That is just your whole story, which when we talked was the second half when we spoke, which was amazing because the first half, which we're going to get to, was amazing. But this, it's just incredible how the stars align and how we, found each other on Kevin Morgan's Living with Abdominal Aortic Aneurysm Facebook page and how this has just blossomed and snowballed. So here it is, you have this direct relationship now with this community that
Mhm.
impacts you, impacts your family, has impacted you guys. But that came out of really everything else that you were involved in that we're going to get to. I do want to ask and see if we have any questions or comments at this point, up to this point, if Josh is there and can answer. He could be muted
I
and
have
not
to click.
realize.
I have to click buttons now, like many
That's okay.
buttons. Let's start
Uh,
with saying hi to some people.
okay.
Right away, Terry Cook, Belda McKenzie, Nancy Roper, Bruce O'Rourke. They all joined in. Anna Abenroth.
Anna, I know
Everybody's saying,
Anna and Nancy. They're in our groups. Hello, hello.
"Oh, okay, great. You know them. That's wonderful." They're saying, I'm saying thank you for visiting. Terry says this is hard to listen to. I'm just saying, however, we need to hear this. It looks like a big hug emoji came in from Anna. You were talking about the service dog going in to get their last goodbyes, and we're all crying in chat. So there's, some shared things
Yeah.
there. And as
Yeah,
you're
I,
telling your
I
story, Anna is like, "Oh my God, no scanning," and then it's right when Karen
nope.
bumped in to said the same thing.
It's
Yeah.
to me, it's just such a travesty. I'm just amazed at 2 years, 3 years that they're not thinking the genetic component. They were so fixated on age and it's just normal potential wear and tear. I mean, that it just, it literally, so here it is. She does have a small enlarged aorta in the thoracic area, but clueless as to what was brewing in her abdominal area.
And it was
And,
interesting because she felt bloated for a while, and they thought it was just
mhm,
her Crohn's, and she kept saying, "Cammy, the crunches don't work. I can't exercise enough, and I'm just bloated. I always feel bloated, and I don't understand." And here's something even more interesting, about the night before, and this bothers me a lot because I 2 nights before, she said we went to dinner, and she was barely eating anything, and I thought that was very weird. And she said, "You know what? I think I want to get an enema on the way back." And imagine
really?
the torture of
Yeah.
having this dissection that was getting worse and worse, and then leaning over and trying to do an enema and thinking it's that, and nothing really working there. And she came out that night, which was strange. And she sat next to me, and we watched 2 hours of reruns of Shark Tank on the couch on this
Hmm.
vacation. Usually she goes right into her, the bedroom. She hangs out
Hmm.
with my dad, and they watch TV in there, and no big deal. But she came out and she sat next to me and she held my hand,
Hmm.
which was very, very odd. But her breathing kept getting worse. And we said to the cardiologist before we left, and this is why I don't understand. And I feel so much blame in this whole game because I advocate for people every day. Why is it that I didn't push harder for my mom? How is it that I didn't figure this out? How is it that I didn't do the research, that I didn't involve more of my doctors like I
Mhm.
always do with my dad, like I do with every one of my other patients? I was on the phone on Valentine's Day, that day where she was sitting there in her little chair reading her book and looking out the window onto Lake Tahoe. And I was busy saving other people's lives as she was listening.
Yeah.
How painful must that have been for her listening to me save other people and I couldn't save her? And
I
that
hear
is
you.
painful for me.
I
And
know.
being in that room and knowing how much she had faith in me, knowing
Hmm.
how much she trusted me, knowing that she wanted me at her appointments and that she was only comfortable and would leave the appointments. Like I could only imagine what was going through her head. That if Kimmy thinks it's okay, and if Kimmy is not answering the questions, then there must not be anything to ask. I
I,
must be okay. Like,
I do hear what you're
how
saying, but
torture.
I'm gonna push back
I know,
and
I'm
just
because I'm gonna
say,
cry.
no,
It's
no,
just
I'm gonna push
painful.
back and I'm going to say 1 + 1 = 2. And it's not that you had blinders on because she's your mother, but when you tell the story at first, I'm like, yeah, okay, it makes sense. She's 80 something, gets out of the hot tub, she probably pulled her back. And she does have Crohn's. It could have been in remission, but maybe something she ate just bothered her, or she could have been developing a stomach flu. And all of the explanations, they all made sense.
Yeah,
And
but
then
she said
but
to
when you
me
look
before
back,
we left,
you realize it. But when you're in it,
I
you
know,
you
yeah,
might not realize it.
you don't. And
Yeah.
but I even said to her the day before we left, I said, Mom, your breathing's getting a little worse. And,
Yeah.
the doctor said it's because you're in so much pain. Maybe we better take it easy. We do
Yeah.
have it, we're waiting for a call from the pulmonologist. You did have a blood clot. Maybe there's some scar tissue there. I don't know. But, I'm not comfortable taking you up to the mountains. Are you sure
Mhm.
you're going to be okay? Are you sure? And I actually said this to her. If you took your last breath up there, would that be okay? Is it really
Wow.
worth it?
Wow.
Like if that was going through my mind and I actually would say such a thing, why didn't I do something about it? Because honestly, I here's what I think it is, and it might have been the same with your dad in thinking back, because why didn't you push further, right? You were saying it's like,
Mhm.
well, I think it's because we think our parents are invincible and we really don't want to think that they're going anywhere. We
Yeah.
really honestly don't want to face that. And I think that's why I felt even in the months before I pulled back. And
Mhm.
I'm normally a very hugging, loving, person all over my mom, cuddling and, wooing all over her. And literally in looking back on the months, I became a little bit more distant and a little bit more cold.
Hmm.
And it's almost like I didn't wanna see it. I
Yeah.
didn't wanna think, and almost like there was this source, this protection that came over me to protect my heart. And it's very frustrating because even the night before, it was incredible that normally on Valentine's Day, my mom and my dad give me a joint card together. And
Mhm.
in that
Yeah.
moment, um, it was interesting because earlier that day I always write poems that come to me, and I write a very heartfelt poem for my parents, because in starting my own nonprofit I've invested my entire life savings, and I'm not I don't really have the money to be going out and buying cards and things like that at the moment, and even at the time. So I
Mhm.
was just going to write a little something, but my mom said, take my credit card, I want you to go down and I want you to go have fun and pick out some cards and join in the fun at the table. I was like, okay. So I did, and I went down there, and actually we got one of the same cards for each other, which was cute.
Yeah.
And then my mom gave me a separate card from her, which talked about how proud she is of my creativity, of my integrity, of my work ethic. And I
Mhm.
thought, every card she's ever given me has always been about, I just love who you are and who you've turned out to be. And I love your heart and your passion and that kind of thing. So
Right.
it was very interesting that she focused a little bit more on my work, because work is something I learned I got that in work integrity and that work ethic from my parents. And it
Mm-hmm.
meant so much to me because my mom and my dad have been my heroes, my mentors and my role models when it came to career. And I said to my mom, I said, "Wow, you're really proud of me."
Yeah.
And it's not that she ever didn't seem proud of me before. She's always been proud of me. She was
Mm-hmm.
right there by my side when I won an Emmy Award. And, she was there. And it was just that I had in my mind in that moment that I felt bad that she was 83 years old. I'm not married. I don't have kids. And I said, I always thought that you were a little disappointed in me because of that. I know you helped me to freeze my eggs many years ago. And this
Mm-hmm.
was really important for you to have those grandkids. And she said, you know what, Kim? I actually feel a little selfish. She said, of course I'm proud of you. Of course I'm proud of all who you are. But you know what? I wanted that so much for you to have a family and have kids because of how much I love you and your father and your brothers and how much you meant to me and how that's my dream. You all are
Right.
my dream. You all
Right.
have made my dream come true. And I wanted you to experience the happiness that I felt my
Mm-hmm.
entire life with you guys. That's all it was. But I feel selfish because actually, I'm glad that you didn't have it
Mm-hmm.
yet, because if you did, you wouldn't be here with me right now, and we wouldn't
Right.
have gotten to spend all of this time together. Because I lived at home, especially during COVID, and was there with them every day and bonding with them. And we became really, really close, like the Three
Mm-hmm.
Musketeers.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have had that time together. And normally I would just have hugged her and kissed her and everything else. And for some reason I didn't. I just kind of looked at her and my heart just kind of melted and I felt so much love for her. And
Mm-hmm.
it like there was this silence, but it was a very powerful silence.
Mm-hmm. It seems like a conversation that subconsciously she needed to have in a
Yep.
foreshadowing kind of way. Like you
Yep.
said, that's a different type of impending sense of doom. I feel like I need to say this now. It has to be now type of thing. And I think part of the reason why maybe we don't push our parents is out of respect. And I think that we don't want them to think that we think they are lacking in their independence at all and that they can't make decisions for themselves. And we're kind of also trusting a little bit that they can articulate how they're feeling. I know shortly after my father passed, my mother got really, really sick. I mean, she never, ever, ever gets sick. She was super sick. What we didn't know is she had sepsis and she had pneumonia. So, and my sister lives out of
Wow.
state. So I got her to the hospital, which is already triggering enough for me. And she won't take any medication. She's only been in the hospital to give birth. And so this is like, she's not happy. And I know she's not happy because my father's not there. And she was refusing everything. And she is just getting grayer and grayer and sicker because she's in agony. We ask her on the pain chart, which is interesting. You ask people what pain level do you think you are? Oh, maybe I'm a 6. But when you show them faces, all of a sudden they realize, well, no, maybe I'm a 10 or 11. So when we asked her and she's off the chart,
Interesting.
I called my sister and I just said, I can't sit here. She keeps saying she wants to walk out. She wants to be discharged. She's not allowing them to admit her and she wants no pain meds. And then the doctor came by and something just came over me and I said, you are admitting her and you are giving her a pediatric dose of morphine because I've never seen her on it. We don't know what she's going to do. And we walked in there and I said, I have made an executive decision and this is what you're going to agree to. Otherwise, I'm not going to go back home with you and you can go back home by yourself and you won't make it through the night. I mean,
Good
and
for
I felt
you.
like, oh God, I can't believe I just said this to my mother. Right? Like, oh God. And she said, okay. And they gave her a pediatric dose. And I asked her how she was feeling. She's like, I feel so much better. I'm like, okay. Then you have to trust your daughters. You have to trust us. Because it's a balancing act. With my father not here, I don't want her to think that she can't do it. But
Mm-mm.
I also I have to, it's like you're out of body and you're just kind of observing what's going on. And I think that part of that plays into that as well. But again, I so appreciate you sharing what you went through with your mom and what it ultimately ended up being, and then how you had to fight for yourself and your brother. And in some ways, learning as much as you did about your mother's situation really kind of saved your brother, right? If you think about it, because he may never have known that he had bicuspid and two aneurysms until
And
something could have gone wrong. So it's heartbreaking, and yet you're very lucky because now the two of you get to stay being monitored, and the hope is that they're able to make that time to with you for elective surgery, when it's time. So, but thank you for sharing that. And I'm just honored that we got to know this story on the anniversary of your mom's transition. I really appreciate that. I know that's
yeah,
important.
it
Yeah.
was really important for me. I needed a way to channel it, to talk about it. And I'm
Yeah.
always about everything happens for a reason. And not that my mom would want, her life to be, constantly remembered as the way she passed. But by the same
Right.
token, she um, would love to know that her story could save other people. And
Listen,
that's what is important.
people need to be able to fight their way in, and not so much the people with known connective tissue disorders, because they know. They walk into an ER and say, I have Marfan. They're going right back to a CT scan if they have chest pain, right back. People like myself, I'm very lucky that they found my dissection, because it could have been chalked up to Crohn's. I thought that's what it was. And if it wasn't for the fact that somebody checked my pulses and my feet, because I dissected left iliac, somebody checked the blood pressure in both arms, over 20-point difference, because EKG was normal. My pain wasn't off the chart. My blood pressure was like whatever, 140 over 82, not anything hellacious. I had pain, so that's why it was like that. Someone could have just easily said, I think you kind of pulled something, or you have reflux. Let me give you
Yeah.
a cocktail. And it was because they knew my father had an aneurysm, and they knew I had detached my retinas. So did my grandmother. It's because they knew my family medical history. And I think
I
that's key
almost
for a lot of this.
I almost wondered at the point where she went to the ER, where she really felt that sharp pain, if there was a major tear or at that point or something.
Yeah.
If they would have, done what we call the chat, the head to
Hmm.
toe, check the carotids, check the heart,
Yeah.
felt for a bruit in the abdomen, and check the
Hmm.
toes, maybe, you know, might have been saved. I don't know if they even just touched the feet, if they might have checked if what happens up there in the abdomen does in fact affect the pressures of the
Yeah.
pulses in the
If
feet.
she dissected into one of her iliacs, it very well could have. So, and this is part of, and we have an article about this in one of our posts. It's either was today or it's coming up, about the what ifs, and just what ifs are not our friends, right? They're really, really, really bad, because you could just spiral, and it's worse than being on TikTok at 1 a.m. I mean, you can what if for hours, and
Yep.
it's a full circle thing. It leads you right back to, there was nothing I can really do about it now except moving forward and helping to create awareness for others. And I do think that for yourself, or for anyone else that is feeling that overwhelming sense of guilt while trying to manage stages of grief, and I do think year two is worse, that going to therapy, I know for me, having some EMDR therapy, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, really helped be able to put into perspective, because it was such a shocking 1 minute alive, 1 minute not. It really helped me replace the experiences I had. I didn't get to see somebody doing manual CPR. I saw that thumper concaving my father's chest. I feel the same way about my father and my mother, like you do about your mother. Um, and it just, I mean, it's you're never going to lose that sight, but it helped me put things into a different level of perspective with my own
Right.
guilt, with my thoughts. And so I would recommend, and I don't know if you're in therapy and you don't have to share that, but for anybody else that's watching or listening, I think it's an important thing, if you especially if you feel like you're stuck and you just twirling around a stage or two of grief, because it is important to get to a place of acceptance, and then the next morning be angry again. But at least you tasted acceptance for a minute. I don't think acceptance ever comes without anger and shock. I think they just keep going, like a pickleball game, just back and forth
Yeah,
and back and forth.
it's interesting because I never really had the full stages, but one of the things that's been a comforting thought for me has been my faith and my family's
Hmm.
faith. And my older brother, it turns out, after this all happened, he waited a little bit and he said, I have to tell you something. He had been in South Africa with his wife on a
Yeah.
mission for several years. And he came home, instead of renewing his visa, he decided to come home 7 months prior to all of this happening. And he was at our house all of the time. And I just thought, oh, well, he just missed everybody and was always there. And he would sit with his wife on the living room stairs and talk to my mom, and they were there a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards he said, well, I have to tell you that when I was in South Africa on one of my prayer walks, God came to me and said, your mother is only going to have one more birthday. You need to be with her. And sure enough,
Mm-hmm.
she had that one more birthday. He was there for it. And 7 months later, she was gone. And
Amazing.
so I have to think, and anytime I go down the spiral, and I don't think any sort of therapy, it doesn't like stop you from thinking certain things.
True.
It teaches you to let those things be there, but then it's how you come out of it, and making sure you come out of it and you have a place to
True.
go afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And for
Right.
me, the faith, in what he said, that there wasn't anything that I could do. And I
Mm-hmm.
could go on and start in this spiral, but I'm always going to come back to, but you know what? Those are there. Those are real feelings. Those are real thoughts. But
Mm-hmm.
you know what? I'm still going to hold on to that faith that there was nothing that I could do, that I can't interfere with God's will and the contract my mom had with her source.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that to me is comforting. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
I go.
Okay. All right. We're going to check in one more time with Josh before we go to the second part that I want to talk about. When we take a breath, you did it. You got through this. Again, I appreciate it. Are there any other comments for this
Oh, we
part,
have we
Josh?
have some comments for sure.
Sure.
After your mom passed, was there an autopsy? Did they get
There
definitive results?
we had the definitive results. It's horrible to not know in those, for that day and a half, 2 days, what in the world just happened. We had no idea. Her heart supposedly was fine, her lungs were fine. What could have possibly happened?
Mm.
And we did, and we had it confirmed that it was an abdominal aortic dissection.
Wow. You got a lot of support when you were telling the part about the that self guilt that was coming through. Um, sometimes we're too close to a person to be able to think rationally, but you can't beat yourself up. No one is perfect, says Anna Aberdath. And Terry Kick says, correct. Correct, Anna. No one is perfect, and never feel the guilt. 100%. Right?
I love
And
you,
so they
Terry.
were also echoing some of your beliefs. Um, we do look at our parents as invincible, and you don't want to ever see them go. So that was
Yeah.
being echoed across as well. Also, we have two anecdotes here. So I also believe that people know when they're ready to go. Both my parents knew but didn't want to tell me. I knew what they were
Mm.
saying without saying it. That's from Terry
Mm-hmm.
Cook. And then
Oh, Terry.
Christina, she says, my mom too. Her and dad decided the day before she dissected more to give me some time. And the next day she went back by ambulance to the hospital. And after another 5 hours, they decided to do a CT scan. We were told she will die within hours or days, and she passed away shortly after Dad and I got there.
Wow.
Right, and so more of these, we're seeing signs, but we're not seeing diagnostics being performed in a timely manner.
True. It's
Yeah.
true. That's why our other organization, Think Aorta, just works so hard in the community to get doctors to think about the aorta. When you're faced with somebody, despite age, gender, we talked about this, or race, if you don't have a definitive diagnosis why somebody has chest pains, definitive, that you're willing to put your name on it, then you just do the CT, order the CT. And again, in your mom's case, nobody in her family that you've spoken about had aortic aneurysms or brain aneurysms or whatnot, but she still had a dilation in her thoracic. And I would think too that anytime that's found, you would check the whole aorta. I also believe that if you're somebody that's not of the typical over 65 smoker overweight male and they find an abdominal, you should go and check the whole aorta because that's not standard, as they would say. And I would think that you would want to have the whole thing checked. To me, it would just make sense. I mean, obviously, I'm scanned now, chest, abdomen, pelvic, because I went all the way straight down. But it's very frustrating because different parts of this country do things differently, which we're going to talk about in a minute too. Let's um let's talk about before all of this happened, a little bit about your journalism work, your work that you did for I think you mentioned, what was it, over about 2 years? Is that what the work that you were doing with the doctors and the peripheral artery disease and what you were finding, and really how that led you to become so passionate about this cause that you created? And I don't want to get it wrong, the global PAD,
Yeah. Mhm.
it's
For sure.
globalpadhealth.org, correct? Or you can find it at thewaytomyheart.org. Do I have it
Right,
correct?
thewaytomyheart.org. We're the
Yes.
global Our 501(c)(3 is the Way to My Heart
Okay.
Incorporated, and we have filed for DBA, doing business as, and the Global P.A.D. Association, or the Global PAD
Association.
Association, and
Sorry.
we also go by PADhelp.org as
Okay.
well, and it goes to the
So
same location.
tell us all a little bit about how this all happened, and just go tell it.
So I am a journalist by trade. I actually, it's so funny because it's almost full circle, because when I was in high school, I used to perform first aid. I was the trainer for, or
Mhm.
manager for, the wrestling team, football team, basketball team, and baseball team at multiple high schools. And I had a great mentor that helped me, Mr. Terlizzi, and he taught me a lot of different first aid techniques, how to wrap ankles, how to wrap wrists, et cetera, et cetera. And I really enjoyed that. So I got a scholarship from a local newspaper, the Press Democrat in Petaluma, to go to college and get. It was a sports scholarship to become an athletic trainer. It was the spot at Sacramento State University where they were pulling to for trainers to work for the San Francisco 49ers. And I grew up watching the 49ers. But it was during my time at Sacramento State that I ended up discovering the microphone. I found my voice. I was very shy in high school and always had trouble communicating. I didn't know how to talk to people. I never felt heard. And I would just be the really good listener. And so I discovered my voice because I was very passionate about sports. Ended up getting the opportunity to do the color commentary for the inaugural state championship. Um, what do you call it? It was some football, um, junior colleges. There we go.
Okay.
The state championship for junior college football. And I got to do the color commentary. And it was then I discovered the microphone. I thought might want to get into sports broadcasting. But to get into broadcasting, you end up having to go in all these different directions. Started in general news, ended up doing business news, did some energy news, did some sports for a while. Was the first female sports director in the San Francisco Bay Area, which was really exciting. It was the first woman in person to have my own racing show. Really loved that. I was the sideline reporter for the Pac 12 for a while. And then I got my dream job at Forbes magazine. So funny that way back when, before I became a sportscaster, I fell in love with business news and technology, and I followed Forbes just incessantly. I loved every single one of the Forbes stories and the reporters and the way they wrote. So, got the job at Forbes, and that's where I met Sir Richard Branson from Virgin Brands. And when I left Forbes, someone that I'd met that was really good friends with him as well said, "Hey, we're starting this global startup competition in partnership with Sir Richard Branson. He's going to be our anchor judge. Would you mind running it?"
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't know. And Richard always says, just say yes, figure out how to get it done. Don't let what you don't know and have never done before get in the way of doing something great. Sometimes it's what you don't know about a particular area that could create the greatest disruption in any industry. So just say yes, figure out how to get it done, and create the change you and others want to see. And so I was like, okay, never done this before. Great. During the 3 years I was a part of it, I vetted more than 3,000 startups, and I discovered that healthcare innovation was moving at the speed of light. And I partnered with someone to start a radio show that was syndicated in 40 markets across the US. And a big part of it was healthcare innovation. I interviewed a couple of doctors who told me that cardiovascular innovation in particular was a really big deal. And a lot of the devices start in opening up arteries in the legs. And I found a company that was getting ready to start their FDA journey to FDA clearance. And I said, "Do you mind if I follow the company?" And they invited me to follow along on their FDA journey. Every single case, nearly a dozen countries, more than 30 states. I traveled to watch hundreds of doctors perform thousands of hours of procedures in which they treated what was called peripheral artery disease or
Hmm.
blocked arteries and mainly the legs. It could rarely be in your arms, it could be, in your head. I mean, it could
Sure.
be elsewhere, the peripherals, but it's mainly the leg arteries that it was focused on. And so these devices would have to be able to safely open up there before they could move on to testing them out on the heart. And so I followed this company, learned so much, but the greatest thing that I learned in this journey was that different doctors have different tools, different techniques, different philosophies, that just because someone has the title, they have a white coat, they work at a big name facility that has a big budget, doesn't mean that they have the right treatment for your presentation of disease. I don't care what you read on Dr. Google reviews. That person who wrote that insanely great review could be dead the next day of a complication. You
Hmm.
don't know that.
Hmm.
So I take all of that with a grain of salt. And I started bringing everything that I learned from this journey to social media platforms, letting them know that these are critical questions you need to ask. These are the techniques that doctors are using to save legs. If you're on deck for amputation and the doctor said that's your only option, get a second, get a third, get a fourth opinion. But don't just get an opinion from someone that's right next door. Get an opinion outside. Ask for an out of network referral. It could make the difference in life or limb.
True.
And there were three catalysts for me actually deciding to take all of this information, take what I was doing on these social media platforms, and actually formalize the activity. And number one was really the seeing a doctor in a large university hospital that had a patient on the table with the same presentation of disease, a blocked common femoral artery,
Hmm.
up there at the bendy part where
Sure.
you go to sit right there, your common femoral artery. I had seen another doctor the week before open it up with ease using this laser, no stents needed, nothing. The
Hmm.
patient walked right out. So I'm thinking when I'm seeing this at this large university hospital, that this is a piece of cake. This patient's going to walk right out.
Yeah.
But suddenly, once they pump that contrast fluid in under the x ray, the doctor said, "Oh, done." And he starts pulling his gloves off. And I said, "Doctor, what's going on?" And he said, "Well, we have to send him to amputation." I said, "I don't understand why." And he said, "Standard teaching protocols dictate that if you can't stent a particular artery, you don't treat it. And we have to have a foundation for education for all of our students." And I literally, my mind was blown. The
Mm.
patient had
Hmm.
signed a consent form that said, if you can't open up this artery or a complication occurs, you can just take my leg. Now, this is the thing that patients don't know. And I have to say this just before I move on with the rest of my
Sure.
story, because I think it's important. Those consent forms that you sign, they actually have an obligation. They can take your leg anyway.
Hmm.
So you don't have to sign
Right.
it. What it saves you from if you don't sign that consent form is from them taking your leg when there's actually still time for you to go get a second opinion or call
That's a
for a
good
second
point.
opinion.
Yeah.
If your life and there's a a moment where it's going to be life or limb, they're going to do what they're obligated to do, which is to save your life, and they will take your limb anyway.
Hmm.
But if your life is not on the line, do you really want them to take your limb in that moment? Or do you want an opportunity to actually get a second
Absolutely.
opinion?
Right.
And so I
Right.
say, ask that question of your doctor and don't sign that form
Hmm.
if you don't have to.
Hmm.
Now, that being said, the second situation, the second catalyst for formalizing what I did was actually what I mentioned earlier with my dad, which is he started getting indigestion. We went to his primary care. He's telling her that when he um, burps. He takes a little bromo seltzer, he burps, he feels relief. So she's like, oh, yeah, I agree. It's just indigestion. And I said, you know what? I actually think that it's a blocked artery. He has a family history of it. He's 78 years old. I want an ECG. Not like the
Hmm.
ECG is the end all be all, but you know what? That's the start to get them at least referred to the cardiologist.
Sure. Right.
And that was my goal. And she said, no, I don't have a diagnosis code for that. And I said, you don't have a diagnosis code for heart disease?
Hmm.
She said, no, I do, but not for him because I think it's indigestion. And I said,
Oh
I have a
gosh.
credit card here. Oh, it's great. I said, I have a credit card here that will literally say that you don't need a diagnosis code, that you can just use my
Yeah.
credit card, run it right through, and do an
Right.
ECG.
Just pay 100%
Lo
out of
and
pocket.
behold,
Yeah.
there was an abnormality.
Hmm.
They referred him immediately to a cardiologist. They were able to get him in for a nuclear stress test. That day, I'd gone down to San Diego for just the day. And I was traveling with the chairman and CEO of that company and going to another
Hmm.
case just to watch it. And on the way, I get a call from my dad that says, oh my gosh, they said there are a bunch of blockages. They have a cancellation for tomorrow. They're going to throw me on the table. And they said if they see
Yeah.
something, they'll just fix it right then and there. And I said, stop, hold
Hmm.
on. Who's going to do what and with what? And he says, oh, I don't know. And I said, so you just want some random plumber that you don't even know go in there and he could do anything he wanted? And I said, you could have a full metal jacket of your heart by the time you leave there.
Hmm.
And he said, oh, you're right. That's not good. He said, would you talk to my cardiologist? I said, yeah, have him call me. And the cardiologist calls me and he says, don't worry, Kim. I know you have experience with this. You've seen these procedures. They're easy breezy. They do them all the time. And I said, but I don't know this doctor. My dad's someone who's faceless. This is just literally plumbing to a toilet. Are you kidding? I said this to him. I said, I don't want someone to just be, you know, trying to unplug his pipes
Right.
that
Right.
there's no face. And he said, oh, it'll be fine. He does this all the time. I know he's good. He treats my other patients. And I said, no, I want a CT scan. I want to know, and I want to have a conversation with him about it. And he said, Kim, you don't need one. It's really bad imaging. And I said, how about a 256 slice CT
Hmm.
scan?
Hmm.
Silence.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, yeah, 3D modeling the heart. You know what? We just got one of those scanners just about 6 months ago. And I said, doctor, you know exactly what to say to the insurance company to get that
Hmm.
covered, right?
Oh, they
And he
do.
said,
Yeah.
he said, yes. And that's a good line for you to tell any doctor with
Hmm.
any procedure. Doctor, you know what to say to that insurance company.
Right. Right.
You need to write it down.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, we'll do it. When we got the results back, we were able to have a very productive conversation with the interventional cardiologist who rarely sees patients in consult, but came down because he was excited to see the 3D modeling and he hadn't had much experience with that. And he agreed that less is more, fewer stents. And he called me from the procedure. He was so impressed with my knowledge. As soon as he pumped the contrast fluid into my dad, he called me and he said, well, here's what I'm seeing. What do you think? We could stent this and we could stent that. But, if you're going to work with him on lifestyle modifications and we have him on the right medication cocktail, then I think we could be fine just placing one stent and we'll check him in a year later. And if we need to stent more, then we'll do it. And that's exactly what happened. We made a bunch of changes. He still had a little bit of growth in his plaque. So we did need to ultimately get his, not only his circumflex, but then his right coronary and LAD, the Widowmaker, stented.
Hmm.
And we were able to get that done. But the third final catalyst was being in a hospital in Louisiana and seeing this doctor just with so much finesse, opening up arteries, the most complex cases, one after another. And there are three or four of them. And I said afterwards, I said, I really want to interview you about these complex cases and what people can learn. And he said, well, I have a couple clinics afterwards. Why don't you come with me there? And then I'll do the interview afterwards. The last clinic case of the day was a person of color who walked in with a cane And I thought he might have been about 85 years old, just looked
Mm-hmm.
incredibly aged. He was only 50. But I
Wow.
looked at his scans and I thought, oh, this will be a good conversation. This will be an easy case for this
Mm-hmm.
doctor compared to what he had earlier, what I saw. I was surprised to hear him say that, I'm so sorry, sir. We're going to need to amputate. It's time. And it's not legal for me to say anything. I had to keep quiet. The man left in tears. It broke my heart. And I said to the doctor, I don't understand. You did more complex cases earlier
Mm-hmm.
today. And he said, and I'll never forget this, this is a Black man from the projects. He smokes, he drinks, he won't eat right, and he won't walk. So why delay the inevitable?
And
And
people
it
don't realize
broke
that
my
these decisions are made every day in all forms of healthcare.
heart. It is.
And
And
it's
the
egregious.
statistics are horrible.
Yeah.
More
Yeah.
than 60% of all amputations related to poor circulation are performed without a doctor following Society for Vascular Surgery and American Heart Association guidelines, which require an attempt or highly suggest that a doctor attempt to restore inline flow or restore blood flow in the arteries
Mm-hmm.
prior to any amputation.
That's
And
amazing.
90% of which no vascular assessment is even performed at all in the year prior to amputation. The American Diabetes Association has said 85% of all amputations
Mm-hmm.
related to poor circulation and diabetes, because diabetes is a major risk factor. The
Right.
molecules of the sugar scratch your arteries. The
Yeah.
small, dense LDL particles can go in and, harden those arteries.
Mm-hmm.
85% of those amputations are preventable with early diagnosis and an attempt to restore inline flow. But these doctors are not even trying. They won't even, for many reasons. Maybe you can argue there's ignorance. They just don't know. Some of them are going to general surgeons or orthopedic surgeons that they're referred to them, and that's the only option they have.
Right.
And a lot of these doctors, they may be at the biggest hospitals. They may be have every single pedigree in the world, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that they're on the cutting edge of treatments. And
Right.
it doesn't even mean that they agree
Yeah.
with the cutting edge treatments.
Do you think
It's
any of
got to
it
be up
has to
to you.
do with finances? Do you think any of it has to do with, an amputation might cost more than trying to restore blood flow? I have to just wonder. I have to ask.
Hospital systems do get greater reimbursement ultimately for an amputation.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you think about everything that's involved,
Right.
from all of the people that are involved with the amputation, the wound care,
Mm-hmm.
the
PT,
rehab,
OT. Yeah. All of
the
that. Yeah.
right, the PT, the prosthetics. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of reimbursement that
Right.
comes from an amputation,
Right.
but no one really considers the economic impact on society and the personal impact
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
on the individual and their families. There are quite a few doctors that think that amputation is the best treatment. There was a
Yeah.
vascular surgeon in North Carolina that spoke to a big group of primary care physicians and actually told primary care physicians to encourage their patients to get amputation because it's the best thing they can do to stop the revolving door of treatments where they end up with multiple sores and open
Mm-hmm.
artery, with doctors trying to open up the arteries in minimally invasive ways, and then with bypass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what they don't tell you is that I haven't had one patient with peripheral artery disease come to me that has only had one amputation.
Mm-hmm.
Amputations are one after another. First it's a
Right.
toe, then it's another
Yeah.
toe. Sometimes they'll say, well, you know what? It is going to be a revolving door of amputation, so we might as well just take the full leg. But
Uh,
they're not even going to try. And I
yeah.
understand some why some doctors may not want to learn these new methods and may argue for their own limitations and not
Mm-hmm.
want to actually go the extra mile and exhaust all available means with wires and balloons and roto-rooting devices clear into what's called the pedal loop, that loop, that
Mhm.
small artery loop in the foot that is so critical to healing, especially diabetic ulcers on the toes, is they have to spend a lot of time being exposed to radiation.
Yeah.
The doctors that we call the true CLI fighters, the true limb savers, the critical limb ischemia, it's the advanced stage of peripheral artery disease, that poor circulation, where it's really blocked. And you're being woken up by Charlie horses at night. There's a wound that
Mhm.
won't heal on your foot. That's the advanced stage. And there's a small group, about 10% of all vascular specialists, that are what we consider CLI fighters or limb salvage specialists that will exhaust every single effort, putting even their life on the line for it because they're sitting there exposed to the x-ray for hours and hours and hours, just slowly chiseling their way through rock hard calcium that is
Right.
restricting blood flow. And I understand that not all hospitals really have the time,
Mhm. Yeah.
and not all doctors have the time. And not every doctor, I mean, that's a long time to stand on your feet. I mean, I've worn the lead that they have to wear for hours and hours, and I have degenerative disc disease because of all the time I spend with that lead skirt on. I can only
Right.
imagine. I'm
Right.
just doing it a couple days a week. These doctors are doing it 5 days a week. How many days during the year? And
Mhm.
so I can kind of understand a little bit of the resistance there. But you know what? If doctors put their life on the line every day for these patients, you're in the wrong business if you're not a limb salvage specialist these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that the patient has the right to know. So if you're not going to do it, even if you don't want to do it and you don't agree with it,
Mhm.
don't deny a patient from making an informed decision that is right for them.
Exactly. And I
And
don't
that's
understand.
important.
I'm not hearing there's anything standardized. If you were in that
No.
one hospital in New Orleans and you're clearly becoming very aware of what you're seeing on scans, kind of like I'm starting to learn a little bit more about EKGs and stuff I see, and you see two scans that are looking the same, I mean, without knowing any comorbidities, your initial reaction is going to be, well, why aren't you giving this person the same time? And to get that kind of an honest answer, which is again horrible, that just it taints everything. It just it's so shady. It's so bad. And so
Oh,
this
it
really
really is.
then drove your passion
Yeah.
and to create your organization. And so
Yep.
let everybody know, because there are people, before we spoke, I'd see people talk about, does anybody after their dissection having issues with PAD? And I would just blow it off like I didn't really know what it was, but I do see people talk about it. So now it's piqued my interest and I want to know how and
Yeah.
why and where the connection is, because again, it's enabling us to offer another resource, another tool to the community. Share with everybody exactly what your organization does, because you gave me such great insight. I want people in the community who might have this to have an opportunity to be able to come to your organization.
And you bring up a good point that there is a strong correlation between aortic aneurysms and
Mhm.
peripheral artery disease because a lot of the risk factors are the same, whether it's smoking, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, whatever it might be, genetic risk factors. There is a strong correlation. So if you have one, you should get checked for the other. I mean, cut and dried. And you
Right.
have to make sure you remind your doctor to chat,
Yeah.
CHAT, right? Check everything from head to toe. But based on those three catalysts, I decided I really needed to bring everything that I learned direct to patients. And I wanted to not only bring it to patients, but I wanted to use it to empower patients, to advocate for patients in the way that I did for my dad. It wasn't just enough for me to write in little social media comments and posts and write blogs and do videos.
Mhm.
I needed to actually walk alongside the patient and advocate for them in person with their doctor. And so that's where the weight of my heart was born because I used to joke in the groups. They're like, "Well, why are you doing this if, you don't have
You
peripheral
don't have
artery
it.
disease
Yeah.
yourself?" It
Yeah.
turns out that my grandfather had it. So when he was out pacing at night and we talked about aortic or aorto occlusive disease, which
Mhm.
he ultimately died from complications related to grafts that got infected that replaced his aorta and iliac arteries.
Mhm.
Even his carotids were replaced with these grafts. Um, he actually had PAD because that's a form of PAD. So interesting that it's in the family. Needless to say, I decided to, you know, start the weight of my heart because it was more of a movement for me. People would say, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "Well, it's just the weight of my heart. I just really am passionate about this. I want to help you."
Mm-hmm.
And as we were going along, COVID hit, and then I had hospital doctors calling me
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Hey, I found your organization. Can you help us? I need to find doctors that can help because our cath lab's closed. We don't have enough
Right.
resources, and I
Yeah.
need to get this person's leg fixed, or else they're going to be here in the ER in a couple weeks, and I'm going to have to amputate. Please help me."
Yeah.
So I had individuals, I had doctors, I had full administrators from hospitals calling me and saying, "Hey, we need help finding doctors that can actually get these patients in advanced stages of PAD in." And I
Mm-hmm.
started using my experience, my resources from traveling the world all those years and watching hundreds of doctors all over the world perform these procedures and saving limbs. And I was like, "Hey, doc, remember me? I was in your lab. I need you to help a patient." And that's how we started just facilitating limb saving options or second opinions for different patients, not only in the US, but around the world. It grew from there because one of the things that I learned about peripheral artery disease is just how preventable and manageable it is if you, the patient, become a true partner in your care.
Mm-hmm.
If you present in an advanced stage, it's a little harder to prevent a procedure. But I've even had patients that have been on deck for amputation. They said, "Hey, that's your only option. You can walk, walk, walk. If you can push through that pain and not get an infected toe, maybe we can prevent it." And
Right.
we've had patients go for years, even Kevin Morgan, that was able to qualify for the World Ironman Championship with full blockages across his legs and a stent in his aorta.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able through his training and focusing on just walking, pushing through that pain, that cramping,
Yeah.
getting those collateral network of vessels. We have these natural bypass systems in our body.
Mm-hmm.
It's called our
Mm-hmm.
collateral network of vessels. They lay dormant until they don't have enough blood in them to be able to show up, right, in a
Yeah.
typical CT angiogram or a scan until they start being really needed, where the body says, "Hey, we need additional
We gotta
blood
turn
flow."
this on. Right. Right.
Exactly. And it
Yeah.
starts, especially when you walk, you start pumping those muscles, and the body says, "Oh my God, we need more blood." So these collateral network of vessels start dilating and even growing like a tree root
Mm-hmm.
around the blockages.
Yeah.
And many people like Kevin Morgan, and we have a couple others in our group, have been able to walk, walk, walk as medicine to
Mm-hmm.
prevent amputation. So we started expanding into working with, for example, Janssen's Save Legs, Change Lives program on early diagnosis. We're also mentioned on the American Diabetes Association website for their PAD Alliance to help
Mm-hmm.
patients who have diabetes, which is a major risk factor, to learn more about PAD and be able to ask their questions and get tested sooner. We also have a full lifestyle modification program that we have, which includes a text based walking program, which is free to doctors. They have their own dashboard for their patients. It's
So
free
great.
to patients, does not require reimbursement. And
Mm-hmm.
we've had doctors tell us that it's really life saving, life changing for their patients. We have a diet book that came out that becomes a workbook that patients can use. It's on Amazon to work with their own dietitian to be able to work on risk factors that can be mitigated when it comes to diet. And that's really important. And we also have a PAD warrior himself who is a certified addiction counselor in Texas who helps patients with smoking addiction, Douglas Salisbury.
Now I'm going to ask you a question. I just want you to use your hand to answer this. See, you talk more when you're the respondent and not the interviewer. That's why you're coughing. Let me ask you a question. How many people work with you in your organization that actual do day-to-day operations and work? Show of your hand. Who does all the work? That's right. It's you. And I find that, first of all, I found it amazing that somebody who's not directly impacted on their body with this, although you had a family member, is by luck and chance and research and drive and interest and passion flip this into something that now can help so many. And you don't see that. You might see people like ourselves here, at Aortic Hope. We live with this every single day. So I one time told somebody that a lot of what we do started out of selfishness and turned into selflessness because we needed something. So it wasn't there. We made it, we created it, and we wanted a support group. So we started one, and we wanted a care package. So I made one for myself with puffy socks, made me happy. And then you offer it to other people. But to see what you're doing and that it's just you. And I know how hard it was when it was just 3 of us in the beginning, and then with just 7. And even with the most incredible 24 to 26 people that I'm blessed to have really do what we do every single day and help this community, it's still there's always more and more and more, and you can always use the help. So I don't know, Kim, how you do this. You must have a cape underneath that
Well,
red
if
turtleneck.
you think about it, so that invisible cape, right?
That's right.
What's interesting is that I cut my teeth really on entrepreneurship in
Yep.
Silicon Valley, watching
Right.
the best of the best, interviewing Richard
Yeah.
Branson, interviewing the PayPal mafia,
Mm-hmm.
Elon Musk and Drew Houston from Dropbox, and Bill Tai, one of the Pied Piper of Silicon Valley, and who's a top venture capitalist, all of the above. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you name them, I've actually interviewed them, and they taught me so much. And you have to be scrappy in the beginning, and you need to, if you're going to fail, fail fast, but you've got to be nimble, you got to grow, you got to just do, be a doer, just do. But what's interesting is that as Douglas Salisbury is on our team, and we call him our pad warrior chief, there's no I in team. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually have the greatest family in the entire world that has grown through this experience. It sucks that we had to meet through PAD, but we
Same,
wouldn't have
same
met if
thing.
it weren't for PAD. And Michelle Villarreal, who gave me the first opportunity, she was the admin of the main group that we're belonging. She is a true partner in crime. She believed in me from the very beginning. She was the first person to really believe in me from day one, to say,
Mm-hmm.
Kim, I want you as a partner in this. I want to work with you. I love what you're saying. And she has been a partner with me from the very beginning. We have Laura, who is a moderator of the group. We have Douglas, who works and answers our Leg Saver hotline, answering calls from all over the world. He volunteers his time. He has a blog called Confessions of a Walkaholic to inspire people on a daily
I
basis.
love that.
He's in our groups on a daily basis, fighting for his life, but
Mm-hmm.
also fighting for that of others, and inspiring so many people to take just one more step and take just one more step. And you have Kevin Morgan, who's in the group inspiring people, and Steve Anzalone, and we have Anna and Terry and Nancy that are also helping out. Nancy's on our new diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, helping us to plan a major event this weekend to raise the voice of people of color, because they
Mm-hmm.
have 3 to 4 times the risk of having their legs amputated than anyone else. And she's volunteered to being on that committee, led by Charles Winters, who's a kidney transplant patient and P.A.D. warrior in advanced stages, going in for even a procedure this week or next to save his legs, after just meeting with us and helping us plan this event and lead the charge in trying to get the word out there to the African American community to get tested, say no to amputation, and to take your health into your own hands. So many people that have become family that have stepped up. There's Ronnie, that's also in our group, that's constantly taking, what I have said to her and what she sees and how I respond to other people and comment. And she is literally every single day, making sure that if she sees anyone in the group that needs help, she spreads the message to go to our website, to call me. Marie Ralston, who's in our group, she is also, struggling in her own right. And she is there every single day, every Saturday, trying to inspire others, and always in the groups, making sure that each patient knows that they're loved and that they have us as a resource for them to help save their limb. And so I hate to forget anyone's names or anything, but you can see that
Yeah.
it does take a village, and that they might not be officially, let's say, employees of us. They're all, everyone is pitching in, everyone is spreading the message. It's like
Mm-hmm.
diaspora. And I think it's amazing. Every single one of our family in our groups, and you can attest to this with yours, every one of them is playing an integral role in saving life and limb
Yes.
just by being there.
Yeah. Just listening to you, I feel, because sometimes, when you get close to the end of the week, you get tired. Doesn't matter what job you do, but you just like reinfused me with more energy again. I'm like, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to go tackle the world. I can do this again. You bring on next week. I want to check in with Josh because I know we're really going over our time here, and I know people someplace have to eat dinner. So I want to check in with Josh and see if we have any other questions or comments. Not that I'm aware. No. You have to see
I
that visually.
mm,
You would see that on an echo. You could see it on ultrasound or an echo, CT, MRI, or TEE, but not an EKG. That won't even
yeah,
show if you're having a dissection.
no. And ECG, ECG or
So many.
EKG. And she's right. It's interesting. And I'm glad that you brought that up, not only for that, but even with heart issues, that
Yeah,
it doesn't always, a blocked artery doesn't always show up on
true.
an ECG. So you really need to, if you're experiencing any sort of symptoms, have some sort of history, risk factors, or anything with any of that, you always need to push for something grander. And I know for me that nothing showed up on my ECG for um, my aneurysm, and so I was pushing for the echocardiogram, and
Hmm.
that's what showed it for me, at least in the thoracic. And I
Right.
haven't gotten the abdominal done yet, so that's
True. And
next
that's why
step.
we talk about knowing your family medical history, because if
Mhm.
there's anybody in your family that's had anything, or someone who's passed suddenly without explanation, that's something you want to bring out if you see your physician or you're in the ER. That'll help you push to get that 5 minute quick CT scan.
And I forgot to unmute myself for the chat. So my response to that was, I'm gonna have Karen answer that. I want to say
Okay.
yes because I never am sure, but then I also said an MRI will also get you imaged, and a CT is the gold standard in an emergency situation. So that's the message we're always trying to push.
Well, CT is gold standard because it's the turnover every 5, 7 minutes. It's very, very quick.
Mm-hmm.
The only issue with CT are there are people who are allergic. So now you're waiting an hour because you need to be pre-medicated. You typically don't get an MRI in an ER because they're 45-minute long tests. And
Yeah.
those are typically scheduled. People have back pain and a knee. They did this, they did that. That's going to take more time. But for
And
those that
just a
are allergic, they're going into the
little
CT.
warning with the CT angiogram. After all my years that I've been working with, um, P.A.D. warriors, not one of them told me the one little thing about the CT angiogram. That's a little bit of a surprise.
Yes, it is.
And you know exactly what I'm saying. Not only did I think my head was going to implode,
Yep.
but I thought I peed myself. And
Yes,
I was
yes, you do.
mortified. I was literally mortified. I didn't want to get up
Yes.
until I was 100% certain that I had not
Right.
wet myself.
Right.
No
It's
one
a
warns me of
very
this.
it's a very interesting, strange, warm sensation.
It's
Better
a
to have
very warm
CTs in the winter.
sensation.
Yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead,
And
Josh.
second question was, will an ultrasound show abdominal aneurysms and or dissections?
Yeah. Well, it will show an aneurysm for sure. I would assume that it can show a dice. I would assume it could show a dissection in the abdominal. Now that's different than you're looking at a different wand altogether than an echo. An echo will only show your thoracic ascending part of your arch, and a little bit of the thoracic descending. I mean, they got to get really up on the side of your chest to see that. They will not use that to show the abdominal. But a lot of people across the country, you actually can go in and have a free abdominal ultrasound screening, depending on your age. And I'm not too sure if the parameters include smoker or overweight. Do you know that by any chance?
I like Lifeline. Lifeline actually for $150 you get all of that. You get
Yeah.
literally head to toe. They check your carotids, they check for aneurysms, which is amazing. They check for peripheral artery disease,
Hmm.
in your legs as well. And I think it's great. And we also just on this simple your doctor, your PCP, you need to take your shoes off at every single thing. You need to
Yeah.
make sure you have a gown,
Yep.
make sure once a year. I mean, you have this because you need the chat. They need to take at the very least their stethoscope and they need to check the carotids.
Yes.
They need to check your heart, ask them about valvular issues and
Hmm.
if they hear any potential skipping of a beat or such. And they need to take that stethoscope to your abdomen and check
Hmm.
for the bruit. They can actually, what I was told is that they can actually hear the turbulent flow in your abdomen if there's a pretty good size aneurysm in there.
Hmm. Hmm. And they
And
would
then they
also
can
be
take
able
you,
to feel that pulsating as well.
right. I think Kevin Morgan was telling me that he had his test. Did he ever tell you he went into the bathtub to confirm that he had an aneurysm before he went to the doctor? Because he said when he was, if you
Underwater,
submerge yourself underwater,
the
that
water
you
rippled.
actually you could feel the pulsating
Interesting.
in the
That's
abdomen.
interesting. Yeah.
Something to look into, something to ask him
Hmm.
about. I just
Yeah,
remember
I
he had
will.
mentioned something in
Yeah.
an interview I did with him long ago when I didn't know much about aneurysms.
Okay. Go ahead, Josh.
I'm not muted again. Sorry about that.
Mhm.
To put the button on Christina's story, she said, "Thank you all for the love." She was told she would die by her doctor, and her mom was apologizing that she was dying, knowing that her dad, with some dementia, would be left alone after 62 years of marriage.
Mm,
Right?
mm.
So she wasn't ready to go, and our heart goes out to you, Christina, once
Yeah,
again.
It does.
that's
I
very
And
hard.
definitely feel for you.
uh, we're getting some clarification questions on for free about an abdominal. Uh,
Yes. So, and I wish I had the card. I will look up the information and I'm making a note. I will do a post about it on Aortic Hope's page. I know, and I believe I I could be wrong. Don't hold me to this. It is Thursday. I thought it was a nationwide thing for these scans. Typically, male over 60 or 65. I'm not sure if the parameter had to be that you had been a smoker and a certain weight, and they would do that scan. I used to have cards from the University of Maryland, and they wanted me to share it because these scans are free and available. So I will look into that and I will post information about that as far as clarifying where is it nationwide, is it state specific. I will get that out. Is that all?
okay.
Is that it?
I think so. So
Okay.
my GP can order an angiogram CT. There's a question mark at the end of that statement.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had my cardiologist do it, but yes, your primary care doctor should be able to order that as well. I just, once you're in this world, I typically have the cardiologist or the surgeon, but now it's pretty much just my cardiologist orders it and everything is shared with the surgeon. My actual measurements, I wait until the surgeon tells me what he has actually measured on the screen. He shows me when he does it. He says, "Here, let's look. This is exactly the how I do it from what point to what point of the zone, and this is my measurement." It's usually somewhat different than the radiology tech, but that's because they're trained to look a certain way, and the guy who's going to actually perform surgery is looking at it for his way. So I never freak out what I see in the report as the findings. I wait until, well, that's not true. I do freak out, but I wait for him to tell me a confirmation. There's been no growth. That's all I want to hear. I don't really care what the number says. I just want to know there's no
I was
growth.
I was
No growth.
about to call
That
you
is
out
such
on
a
not
good
freaking
point.
out.
Uh-huh.
There's actually that's such a good point because even with my brother with his, the doctor said, I don't want you to look as much at what the radiologist's perception is because I'm going to look at it very differently. I'm going to measure it myself and I'm going to determine based on everything else, all of your other risk factors, all of your other comorbidities, your medical history, and I'm going to make the determination at that point what this actually means. And so
Right.
you need that in context. And I think that that is so incredibly important because we've had a patient that whose doctor didn't bother to look at the
Mm-hmm.
scan himself, and literally it was misinterpreted by the radiologist. If the cardiologist would, or the vascular surgeon would have looked at it himself, he would have realized that, wait a minute, that is just some collateral vessels that are feeding the legs. All of his arteries are blocked.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we ended up saying, hey, we're paying attention to your symptoms. Don't listen to it. He's telling you to come back in 7 months for another scan. I think you need something right now. Let's get you to another one. And the doctor called me and said, hey, this guy's dead man walking. How did they
Yeah.
miss this? And this was at a large university hospital, that the doctor himself did not check the scan and just read the notes. Make sure your doctor checks the scan and does the measurements
Mm-hmm.
himself.
Absolutely. And I had the opposite. I got a radiology tech wrote back and said my aneurysm in like 6 months went from 4.7 to 5. And it was 5 X something. And I lost my mind. And then the surgeon said, come on down to the office. Well, that was it. I had to bring somebody with me because I'm glazed over. I'm not going to hear anything once I walk in the door. I'm great to help other people. When it comes to my own body, all rules go out the window. And he said, why are we here? What's going on? I said, well, you called me here because it says 5. He goes, oh no, I just wanted you here so I could tell you we're not doing anything. That was length. I don't know why they included the length. They don't ever do that. That's not width. You haven't changed. Don't worry about it. Go home, go do something. It's like, and you're just, the adrenaline leaves and you're like weak. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I put myself through that. But that's because everybody presents information sometimes differently, even though they supposedly went to similar curriculum, right? And
Yeah.
so it's very confusing. And yeah, bottom line, let your surgeon or your ordering physician make the determination after reviewing the scans themselves. It's a lot of education happening here tonight, Kim. Kim with a Y, Karen with a
I
C and an I. It's great.
Yes, I could, and I have an IE at the end.
Okay.
Um, but I could actually talk to you so much. It's so fascinating to hear you talk and your philosophy and how you look at things just the way I do. And no, we're not doctors. We're just patients ourselves.
Right.
And
Right.
there is so much that we can see just from not being locked into a textbook.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting, there are a few doctors that have actually said that, if we're going to call you Dr. Kim, and I actually have sometimes a couple doctors that have called me and asked me, my opinion on other doctors and what I've seen in their labs, and what I would suggest for certain patients in their case. And knowing them differently, they appreciate the relationships that I
Right.
have with these patients and how much more I know about their lives.
Yeah.
One of my partners in crime, Dr. John Phillips, who co-hosts our weekly radio show, The Heart of Innovation, and our Save My Piggies podcast, which at some point I'm going to get you to co-host on there.
I would love that.
Yeah. Oh, actually, you're going to be on, right?
I
March
am going to
23rd.
be on. Yes, that's right. March
We're
23rd.
gonna
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna hear Karen's full story. I get
That
to
is, I get the
flip
hot
the
seat.
tables.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll be taking notes on ways to be an even better interviewer. Hopefully, I didn't jack this
I
one
think
up,
you
but
were brilliant.
I forewarned you. We were really casual because not many interviewers say jack this up, but I do. So yeah, yeah. No,
No,
that'll
you
be.
did
I'm
great.
excited to do that in March. That would be
But Dr. John
very
Phillips came
exciting.
out just today with this amazing statement about just empathy,
Mm-hmm.
that he's learned, through participating on this show with so many patients and being in our studio audience and hearing their
Yeah.
stories and things like that, that he said he never got from just being in clinic. And he has so
Mm-hmm.
much more empathy for these patients. And now having a different engagement with them, he was like, you have to realize, as I now do, you think about it differently, where yes, you have to be logical. You have to go by your textbook. You have to go by guidelines and standards and protocols, and you need to run through your list of check marks. But he said you then have to also shift gears and realize this person's a mother, a daughter, a sister,
Mm-hmm.
a brother, a son, an uncle, a friend, whomever it might be. They're a human. They go home at night, they fix dinner, they eat dinner, they go to sleep at night. Like, they're human,
Mm-hmm.
just like you.
Right.
And he said that is actually game changing for
Yeah.
any doctor, to literally flip that switch and
Mm-hmm.
turn that on in an appointment. Such a
Right.
different approach. And he said that's truly changed for him in literally immersing himself, in the lives of patients in this very different way.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's treating the whole patient And it's
Yep.
treating them the way you would want a physician to treat your loved one. And that's where they need to take that minute sometimes, as we said. Sometimes it's like herding cattle. And I won't stick with somebody if that's how I'm left feeling. I
Yep.
expect when my doctor's running late, I'm happy because that tells me they're giving somebody time and I'm expecting the same time. And I'm very upfront. For the first time, interviewed a physician for myself. I remember interviewing a pediatrician for my son, and I was like, how do I interview him for myself? And I thought this is the biggest lesson in self advocacy. I have to be very honest in my communication style, what's going to work for me. And in turn, how do they want to be communicated with? And, it was, oh God, it was such a great experience. And then I took that to my existing physicians and kind of analyzed, is this really going to is it really meeting my needs, or do I just go because they seem kind of nice and I've been going? And I made a lot of switches and changes. And I think that came with age, and it came with realizing that life is short and I'm not going to just tolerate what's being said to me. Like you
Yep.
said, I'm going to advocate, I'm going to research, I'm going to ask somebody to help me if I need help and do due diligence on my behalf. And one of the things you also said before we need to go and wrap this up. One of the things you said was, you know, and and I didn't think about it this way, is when you're looking for a physician, not only not just settle for what you're being told necessarily, but you don't have to just stick with your own backyard. You can go into another backyard, but on the same token, sometimes the biggest name hospitals are not necessarily the best. It's really not the named hospital, it's the physician, it's the
Right.
experience, it's how many people they've worked on, it's how innovative, what kind of follow up, continuing education. Are they going to these conferences? Are they learning new techniques? Are they open? Are they willing? Because you can have physicians at the highest name hospitals, which there's so many great physicians, but to leave your own backyard where there might be a great center there to go to name brand, at the end of the day, if you have an emergency, you're going to your backyard because by the time you get hours away, it might be too late. So you have
Yep.
to kind of really look, as you said, don't necessarily go by what Google ratings, whatever it does, health grades necessarily all the time
Or
because someone does
WebMD,
right.
any of them.
Yeah. No, it's
They're a good
really got to be
guideline.
interviewing.
If
Right.
attitude's
Exactly.
important, it's
Sure.
great. But I also have a rule in our group that if you think you can't recommend a doctor in the
Right.
group, you
No.
can't tell another patient that, oh, my
Hmm.
doctor is great. How
Yeah.
do you really know that they did the best treatment for you? And if that same
True.
treatment is right for someone else?
Right.
You really don't.
Exactly.
And especially when it comes to opening up arteries, and even the same thing with stenting and aortic
Hmm.
dissection, there are so many factors
Yeah.
that literally can dictate a positive outcome. I mean, whether
Right.
it's the skill set, it's the volume of cases, it's the imaging tools that they use.
Hmm.
Especially for the legs, do they use an intravascular ultrasound known as IVUS as their second eye to go in and make
Hmm.
sure what's the morphology of the plaque or the type of plaque that's in there? What's the actual size of the vessel? Some doctors say they can see the whole thing in a CT angiogram and prepare everything before, but honestly, I've witnessed it. It's not till they go in with that additional imaging
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
truly get the actual size, and especially make sure that they placed, the balloon and the stent correctly
Hmm.
afterwards to maintain that vessel open. You need to ask these specific questions, and you need to know what they
Yeah.
are. You can't just, again, title, philosophy, um, big name facility, what a review says. No, you need to know specifically the types of skills, access points, approaches that are performed
Right.
for a particular procedure before you decide to go with those doctors. And the only way to do that is to talk to someone like Karen when it comes to aortas, or talk to someone like me when it comes to PAD, because
Yeah.
many doctors will tell you, you don't need to know that. You just need to know that I'm a specialist and I treat that. No, that's not the case.
True.
You need to
Right.
understand. Don't just tell me they're qualified because someone referred you and they have the
Hmm.
title. You got to know that they can approach a blocked artery in your leg coming down from your groin. And if that fails, that they can come up from the foot and come up what we call a retrograde approach, come up from the bottom to open up that artery.
Hmm.
You need to know
Hmm.
their threshold before amputation. There are a lot of things that you should be asking. And if a doctor says, no, you shouldn't get a second opinion or get really upset about it or doesn't like those questions, that's a red flag
True.
because the best of the best doctors are going to appreciate the fact that you come in with some really well thought out questions that are
Right.
well informed.
Because if you come in with questions, they know that you're now invested in your own healthcare. You're
Yep.
going to be invested. You're going to do the work that you need to do after they do all the hard work that they've been doing. All right, Kim, this has been fabulous. I hope you
Oh,
enjoyed being in the hot seat, but I can't
one
go because
one
clearly somebody has a comment, which is wonderful. Yes, Josh.
one final
Hi, Josh.
question.
Yes.
Can
Yeah.
a CTA abdominal pelvis be augmented with a full leg scan?
Mhm.
I would think
I'm
so.
sure that they can do it. It just would be a matter of what does the doctor write down as the codes
Right.
to ensure that
You keep going.
the insurance will cover.
Right. And that you just keep going. Right.
I like that
And
line.
remember that
You
statement,
know.
doctor, you know what to say.
Yeah, I like that line.
Yeah.
You know what codes to put
It
in for
works.
this insurance.
It's true. I mean, I believe me, I had a doctor tell me that the other day. They asked me, I was coming in for a certain procedure for a reason, and when I didn't say I was really in pain, they came over and they were like, "Yeah, but so you called me because you were in pain, and so this is kind of why we're doing this." And I'm like, "Well, that is very true. So you do whatever you need to do to get it taken care of." Yeah. So you just. But these are things that so many people don't know,
Hmm.
to advocate for themselves, which is why organizations like ours that are led by patients and impassioned people within the community are able to provide help for other people. All right, I'm going to get back to my closing. Is that okay?
Okay.
It's okay with
Velda
Josh.
says, thank you, ladies. Great job. And
Thank you,
Felicia
Thank
Velda.
jumped
you.
in to say, absolutely, Kim. She's agreeing with you. Felicia jumped in a little bit later into the broadcast, and she's been happy to hear
Okay.
everything that's been going on.
Wonderful.
Okay,
Well,
ladies,
thank you
take it away.
to everybody who joined us. That was a great group of people. And if you were unable to catch this live, if you're happy in now, it's going to be on our YouTube channel on AHTV. It's going to end up on Kim's thewaytomyheart.org. I'm assuming it'll be someplace on one of your YouTube channels as well. And then you have a
Sorry, on
chance
our
to get to hear,
pages and our
yeah,
groups. Yep, it's
whole other
there.
half back in March when I get the pleasure of joining you as well. Thank you so much. It's so great that we got a chance to meet and we got to do this. I'm so thrilled that we had an opportunity to really share your mom's story and your family's story and have a chance to honor her in that way because this story is going to resonate with many people and help others to be on top of their own parents' care. So that's a blessing right there in and of itself. But thank you again so much, Kim, for joining. I really appreciate it.
Oh, and I appreciate you and all you do. I mean, it's amazing. I'm so glad I discovered you, and thank you so much for your passion and commitment to helping save life and limb.
Thank you. All right, everybody, click like, click that bell button so you're notified every time we go live so you don't miss great opportunities like this. And until the next time, thank you again so much. Have a good night.